Canonically, the ZEO powers are supposed to be one of, if not the strongest powers in all of Power Rangers. So why then did they suddenly disappear and become the Turbo Rangers? It's a question, and possibly even plot hole, that has had many Ranger fans debating for decades. There are multiple theories as to why the ZEO powers were ditched, and I will be covering a bunch of them today, and then finishing with what I believe really happened to them. So let's get into it. So first, a brief history of the ZEO crystals and the powers themselves. The ZEO crystal is an extremely powerful object which produces enormous amounts of energy, becoming stronger with the passage of time. It is comprised of 5 subcrystals which are used to access the morphing grid. The exact origins of the ZEO crystal are not actually known. However, in the episode Master Vial and the Metallic Armor, it is explained that it had been brought to Earth's moon by an ancient race from the M51 galaxy. They hid the ZEO crystal in the Caves of Deception located beneath the Moon Palace. To protect the ZEO crystal from anybody who would try to harness its power for evil, mainly Master Vial, it was surrounded in a force field that would destroy anybody that was not purely good who came into contact with it. So who were the ZEO Rangers? Well, 4 of 5 were formerly Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, while Tanya was a new addition to the team, joining as the Yellow Ranger. The group was also eventually joined by the Gold Ranger, Trey of Triforia, who later passed his powers on to Jason, the original Red Ranger. Having managed to recover the fragments of the ZEO crystal to undo Master Vial's time spell, the Power Rangers found themselves without the power coins and their command center. However, Zordon and Alpha 5 would then reveal the power chamber, a new base built under the old one. Using the ZEO crystals, they created new morphers known as Zeonizers, which allowed the Rangers to take on a new, more powerful form. With Aisha having decided to leave the team and Billy taking on more of a support role, the role of the Yellow Ranger was filled by Tanya, and the 4 remaining Mighty Morphin Rangers, Tommy, Rocky, Adam and Catherine, are now joined by Tanya as each of their ZEO crystals transformed them into ZEO Rangers. The group would find its villain in the form of the Machine Empire, whose power was so great that it threatened previous villains Lord Zed and Rita Repulsa to the point that they fled the solar system. So how did these ZEO powers actually work? Well, the Zeonizers harness the power of the legendary ZEO crystal to transform 5 heroes into the Power Rangers. The Zeonizers materialized on the wrists of the user and activated by drawing power from the ZEO crystal. Zeonizers were interlocking wrist-mounted devices that harness the energy of the ZEO crystal and power the ZEO Zords. The Zeonizers were created for the Rangers by Zordon to replace their power morphers. These devices were the first wrist-worn morphers and utilized the ZEO subcrystals in a similar manner to the power coins. During the Power Rangers Turbo movie, the Zeonizers appeared one last time when Kat was morphing to soften the impact of falling from a cliff and into a river. They were abandoned then in favour of the Turbo powers to supposedly allow them a better chance at taking on Divatox and Malagor. But if you ask me, the Turbo powers sucked in comparison to the ZEO powers. So what happened to them? The gap between ZEO and Turbo has long been a source of mystery and confusion for fans, with a timeline that contains numerous unexplained events that have created quite a handful of plot holes over the years. One of the biggest mysteries has been why the Rangers switched from the ZEO powers to the Turbo powers. It was established that the ZEO crystals were super powerful and would continually grow stronger over time, meaning that the Rangers themselves would grow infinitely stronger as well. It never made sense why they would just give that up, or more importantly, why we've only seen the ZEO powers in action a few times since the end of that season. So let's cover some theories. This first one I came across during my research from a Reddit user by the name of Kidney Punch by Freezer. Great name. This theory suggests that the ZEO powers were killing the Rangers, and that's why they ultimately switched to the Turbo powers. Now, while this might seem silly on the surface, there is a great deal of evidence for it. Towards the end of the season, Jason, the Gold ZEO Ranger, the 6th Ranger, had to give up his powers to Trey of Triforia, who was an alien from another planet. Trey was the original holder of the Gold ZEO power, but had to transfer the power away to someone after he was injured in a fight and needed treatment to restore himself to normal. As time went on, however, the powers were killing Jason, as it wasn't developed for human physiology in the first place. As such, he had to give them back to Trey in order to save his own life. Well, what if the same could be true for the rest of the ZEO powers, but at a slower rate compared to Jason's? Perhaps since the rest of the ZEO powers were built by humans, or because the ZEO crystal had originally locked onto human rangers in the first place, they weren't killing them as fast, but still doing so at a slower rate. Perhaps the ZEO powers are just not fully compatible with human physiology. This would explain why they created and ultimately switched to the turbo powers. Despite the power they possessed with the ZEO power, it was draining their life force, and thus they needed a new power source to fight against evil forces. Now, I personally really like this theory. The evidence to back it up makes sense, and it also explains why we have only seen the powers used a couple of times since, but not regularly, using them sparingly to prevent the power of the ZEO crystals affecting the Rangers like it did to Jason. The next theory is that the ZEO Rangers simply still have the powers, they're just used in emergency cases, as they're far stronger than any other powers, as per Zordon's "don't escalate a battle" rule. They are just considered the big guns, so where could they be throughout the series? Well, the turbo powers beat Divatox once in the movie, so why fix it if it's working? Plus, their Blue Ranger left, and if they want to form a Megazord, they would need to have a Blue Ranger, and the turbo powers from Justin would do just that. In Always a Chance, there's a sentimental reason of Adam wanting to be an example of a Ranger fighting through the risks and conquering fears for Carlos, while also relating to him by being a fellow Black Ranger. So attempting to use his Mighty Morphin Power Morpher does just that. It wouldn't have made sense for him to transform into a ZEO Green Ranger. It doesn't show him conquering fear like the Power Morpher would, but also being the Green Ranger from the ZEO powers wouldn't really relate to Carlos as a Black Ranger. So this just made more sense. Then in Forever Red, the ZEO powers seemed to work just fine for Tommy. Then once a Ranger, perhaps Adam was originally going to bring his ZEO powers, but when he learned that Sentinel Knight can fully restore a broken Ranger's powers, he volunteered as the Mighty Morphin Black Power Ranger so he could have two sets of powers out there, one that slowly is killing him, and one that can be used at any time. In the Legendary Battle, again, the ZEO powers work just fine here. And then in Dimensions in Danger, again, Tommy's ZEO powers work just fine. I think Cat morphed into Turbo and Rocky into Mighty Morphin because those are the morphers they happen to have on them when they were captured. Especially if you go along with the ZEO powers are the big guns mentality, they would likely carry the weaker power sets along with their day-to-day life, especially when they aren't active Rangers. So the final theory I have for you before I reveal the most likely answer is another extremely interesting one. This theory suggests that Zordon was playing the long game. It seems as soon as the Millennium Message appeared, he orchestrated the changeover with the Turbo team. Why would anyone do that? With the universe at stake, college can wait a few years. Zordon purposefully chose to replace the ZEO Rangers. It was to take the spotlight off of them. The second Turbo team then was eventually to be the face of the team under the leadership of Andros. Then the ZEO veterans were there as deep undercover sleeper agents. There is no rational way that Tommy and the others weren't fighting somewhere. So with those theories out of the way, I'll finish with my own opinion. And that is, well, sort of a combination of all of these. To me, it's very clear that these powers were never destroyed or disposed of, as we of course see them used a few times in later seasons. I think that all 5 of the ZEO Rangers kept their powers long after ZEO. As stated earlier, without Rocky as the Blue Ranger, they would not have access to a full team of full power, with all of its benefits. And perhaps if the ZEO powers did grow stronger over time, it could potentially just be too powerful for the human physiology, similar to what was happening to Jason as the Gold Ranger. So it would make sense to have a new set of powers that could be used in all times, without any risk to the Ranger's health. And while the Turbo powers may have been more powerful than the ZEO powers at base level, they certainly don't compare to the ZEO powers after they have had some time to grow in strength. Then, when time came to pass the Turbo powers onto a new team, Zordon knew that in case of emergency, he had a team of the 5 most experienced and powerful Rangers ever. It cannot be argued that the ZEO teams are not the veteran team, with more experience than any other team in history, having them in the back pocket in case of emergencies, like the return of the Machine Empire in Forever Red for example. It just makes perfect sense, at least to me. So let's talk about this in the comments down below, guys. Do you have any theories of your own? Do you agree with mine? Have I missed any obvious information? Let me know down below. Okay, that's it for today, guys. I hope you have a great day. Thank you all so much for watching. May the power protect you, and I will see you next time on the 6th Ranger.